Welcome back, everybody, or welcome. Oh, I see Chad Morris. I didn't expect to see her. Welcome to the Tess of the D'Urbervilles discussion group. This time chapters 18 through 24. Before we dive into those chapters, I'm just going to tell you a few quick stories. The first is that Grace texted me prior to a few days ago as we were preparing the discussion and said, "Oh, this is where we get to discuss the scene." And I said, "I know, the one beside the cow." And then a few days later, I texted her and said, "Oh, it occurred to me that you might not have meant the one beside the cow. You might have meant the river scene." And she said, "I did mean the scene beside the cow, but I also could have meant the scene in the river. And also, there's another scene of their falling in love in the early morning hours that has even, I even maybe ranked higher than either of those after rereading it." So I think we are in danger of Grace and me just swooning over the details of these chapters, line by line. But I think worse things could happen too. I also texted her and said, "Has falling in love ever been so beautifully rendered?" And she said, "If it has, I haven't encountered it." So that's what I think our focus is going to be, just the magical, exquisite beauty of the incremental steps of their falling in love. I just am absolutely delighted by them. Finally, I have to tell a quick anecdote that I was at the car wash yesterday getting Tess, my new car, washed. And I was sitting there with my book and a notebook, and the man next to me said, "Oh, Tess is my favorite of the Hardy novels." I think this has happened to me once in the entirety of my lifetime, when I was sitting on a park bench in the Cotswolds and an elderly woman sat next to me and I was reading Middlemarch, and she just sighed and said, "George Eliot." And I was like, wow, such a rare experience for this to happen. So that was delightful. And I told him all about Read With Me, and he said he was he said he was so happy to have discovered this. And so he maybe end up joining my car wash encounter, may end up joining one of our sessions sometime soon. We'll see.
That is so delightful.
It was great. All right, so chapter 18. It's about Angel Clare. I feel like this is just where we get to know him a little bit better. And one of the themes, I think, of this section, I can't help but recall that line, "Where was her guardian angel?" And throughout these chapters, it feels like we are discovering whether he might be that angel. So I think there's some things in this chapter that show why they would fall in love and why he might be her guardian angel. Grace, anything you want to start with?
When you started talking about those three scenes, I started to tear up already. And I'm not sure if that's a good sign or a bad sign for my ability to participate. Yeah. I just love this section so much. I'm really excited to talk about in the margins of this first chapter. I wrote, "Finally, a real introduction," because we kind of just very briefly have been given glimpses so far, and now you get like a whole backstory. So it's exciting.
He has come out from behind the cow.
He is no longer the voice behind the dumb cow.
He's now kneeling in front of it with his arms, not quite yet, but we'll get there. So what strikes you as significant about Angel Clare as he's introduced in this chapter? Things
that strike me as significant are, pardon me, kind of the ways in which he's a bit similar to Tess. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I say that almost hesitatingly just because it's like, you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. But the way that he seems to have also had he was nearly entrapped by a woman much older than himself, though luckily he returned not greatly the worse for the experience. When I got to that point, I was like, wait, I need to go back because there's no way that that's the only thing. So also the fact that he is kind of like separated from his family and has kind of gone off to do his own thing. I think that there are quite a few things about them that are similar, even though they come from such different families.
Yes. Well, that theme appears again that you brought up about God as he ought to be. Both of them have this kind of deep sense of reverence, which is not directly derived from the church.
Right. Yeah. And that was the next thing I was going to say, was that he seems to, it's more based in like intellectual ideas for him, but he has this idea he talks about with like the church not being where it's at.
Right.
And one of the things that he finds so endearing about Tess is that she is so in touch with nature.
Yeah, he cannot honestly be ordained her minister while she refuses the church. She, the church, refuses to liberate her mind from an untenable redemptive theology.
Yes.
I love the contrast between him and his father. His father, who the university as a step to anything but ordination seemed to this man of fixed ideas a preface without a volume.
I underline that part too. I love that line.
So there's a certain, so what is it about them? I've described Tess as having a mark upon her forehead before. It just like, there's a special depth, a special, I don't know, a spiritual quality about her almost, but an independent spiritual quality. And he clearly possesses that too. So there's just something that so distinctly separates them from the crowd. I'm tempted to skip ahead, but I'm going to stop myself. So yeah, I think we have that same reaction to him that we do to her, that they rise above the world around them in some way, even above the good characters around them, that they're those three dairy maids. I just love them.
I love that.
But Tess is special.
Yeah.
It's a little bit.
The others. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just I hadn't thought of this before, but it's a little bit like Lizzie Jane from Pride and Prejudice to me. Jane is so good and lovely and wonderful, but Lizzie is something.
Lizzie's where it's at.
Something above and beyond. Yes.
Yeah. The other thing that I really liked about this chapter and about Angel's character is how he went to the farm expecting everybody to be Hodge. And when he got there, found that at close quarters, no Hodge was to be seen. How he discovered all of their individual personalities and how within them there were so many different facets of what made each of them individuals. I just thought that was really lovely. And it reminded me of, I don't remember what exactly we were talking about last week, but when something about the story that Dairyman Crick told in that first chapter. We were talking about how someone mentioned that it might have even been sad that everybody just kind of like believes that story. But I really like this passage because it shows us that they're all really, they're not just like dumb farmer folk. They're all their own individual people and with their wonderful little personalities that we then get to see throughout the next several chapters. Yeah,
that's great. Okay, so what else do we need? Anybody else want to comment on Angel? I have other things to say, but I can open it to the floor if people have things they want to say. I cannot let this chapter pass without highlighting this line, the distinction between Angel and his father, and just highlighting what is unique and special about Angel. What is the good of your mother and me economizing and stinting ourselves to give you a university education if it is not to be used for the honor and glory of God? His father repeated. Why, that it may be used for the honor and glory of man, Father. So that to me both shows what makes him worthy of Tess and what could make him her guardian angel in that sense, because he is able to think for himself in when it comes to religion, and not just be like his father, not just, what was it? Not just religious, but devout, a firm believer in the old and ardent sense of the evangelical school.
Mhm.
Okay, people have comments.
Caleb's got this. Yeah. You're on mute, Caleb.
Okay. One thing that really stuck out to me that kind of made a connection between the two of them, then he seemed to discern in her something that was familiar, something which carried him back to a joyous and unforeseen past before the necessity of taking thought had made the heavens gray. And I mean, I think that there's a lot in there, the necessity of taking thought, just like, you know, when you're young and vibrant, like everything's fine, you know, and like Tess was, and then suddenly there's like, you have to take thought. You're not given all of the instruction that you need to survive. You have to take thought, and it makes the world seem imposing and heavy. And I don't know, that was just really brilliant.
Well, it's that element of having that direct connection to human nature and not having that be imposed upon, right? So it's the time before that was imposed upon. But until you highlighted that line, I feel sort of dumb. I hadn't realized that he recognized her, and you think, oh yeah, from the Maid dance. No, from from something inside of him. It seems like more than from that moment. Okay, Ginger, did you want to?
I just wanted to say one thing about another thing about his character is that there's no sense of entitlement. When in that conversation with his father, he sees, okay, well, it seems there was some sort of understanding. And if I were to continue taking their support for my education, then I would be breaking some sort of trust. So just one more piece. Like, I feel like this chapter was really good at giving us so many little pieces of him. And it's just one more. And it also matches up with Tess as well. There's no sense of entitlement.
Yeah, thank you.
Sarah's got her hand up too.
I had a question just before that section that we were talking about, that Caleb mentioned, the line, what a fresh and virginal daughter of nature that milkmaid is. I thought, I don't know if I should take this as like an uh-oh moment, like that he's wrong, you know, that like is there some, did you read that as like sort of foreboding, or more like that, I don't know, that he sees her in the light that she should be seen?
It definitely made me cringe, and there are threads throughout the next couple of chapters that connect with that, when, you know, there's a whole chapter where she's trying to foist him off on one of the dairy maids because she's trying to repress the love that is instinctive and unavoidable. She can't. She starts to recognize that, and she thinks that he would be better off if he were one of them. So yeah, I think the idea, because she has a secret and she doesn't feel like she can tell him that. So yeah, I definitely felt a little bit of foreboding there. Grace, you?
Well, I still haven't replaced my version. Mine says, what a genuine daughter of nature that milkmaid is.
Genuine. That sounds euphemistic.
Yamana.
Yes, I just want to make a quick comment. I'm so glad that I persevered from the beginning of the book, when I was feeling like, oh, I can't read this. It's just so depressing. This has been wonderful. And yeah, so I really enjoyed it. And I also wanted to make an overall comment. I really love Hardy's. He's almost like a painter when he talks about different scenes and he depicts things. Like, I just see visually everything. So just thank you very much for continuing this and encouraging me to continue on.
I'm delighted to hear that. And I don't think Shoshana is here today, but I was participating in a discussion group with her in another context, and Hardy and Tess, the D'Urbervilles, came up, and she described him as having a great soul, and that perhaps in certain ways that soul was misdirected, but the greatness of his soul is undeniable. And I think you really experience that intensely in these chapters. So that's what we, it's a blighted soul maybe, but it's a great one. And we have so much to gain from his observations.
Well, even last night as the sun was going down, I looked out I have like 3 windows next to each other that look out on the rest of my neighborhood. It's a really pretty view. And it just, everything looked slightly, just the slightest tint of purple, just like over the whole scene. And I actually don't think I would have noticed the shade of purple had I not been reading this section right now. And it made me feel ever more grateful for having Thomas Hardy's novels in my life.
Well, I know Molly posted a picture on Facebook recently of just a scene from around your house, and you were disappointed that it couldn't capture the way the light reflected off of the leaves in this scene. The photograph could not do that, right? And my thought in the moment was, well, Thomas Hardy could. He could do it in words, what a photograph that's literally reproducing the scene cannot do. And I just have to connect. I've just been preparing my summer lecture on Hugo and Rostand. And Hugo says that art is not a mirror, it's a distorting lens where things are transfigured under the magic wand of art. But his point is that a mirror actually reflects things in a way that dulls them. A mirror is not, in fact, a reflection. So art can't be a mirror. It has to be a distorting lens in that sense. So it's funny to think of a distorting lens as making us better able to see reality. but that is true, and that's what the photograph that's incapable of reproducing the reality shows us. So yeah, that's amazing.
The Lady of Shalott, a mirror is not enough.
Right. Exactly. Okay, so let's see if there's anything else I want to say about Angel. Yeah, there were other lines like where it says he had begun to evince considerable indifference to social forma and observances. So getting better in touch with human nature, getting away from society and its formal rules. And that again, just kind of puts him in the position to be the guardian angel, the one who will understand her and not just conform to social rules.
Yeah, I love his kind of unexpected fulfillment in living the farmer's life.
Yeah. Yeah, and that same section, that's where it says he made close acquaintance with phenomena which he had before known but darkly, the seasons and their moods, morning and evening, night and noon, winds and their different tempers, trees, waters and mists, shades and silences, and the voices of inanimate things. So that's that poem you read was just so perfect for pulling out that theme. It's like nature has become his church.
Yes. Oh, it's so great. And this lifestyle of just being close to the land, being invested in the land is perfect to illustrate that. That's why I love farms.
So there's the moment that he finally pays attention to her in this chapter. We all have to love that he hasn't paid attention to her up to this point, because contrast that with Alex's response.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And there's the line, he was ever in the habit of neglecting the particulars of an outward scene for the general impression. I wrote in the margin, like, we know.
That's great. But he is not a predatory, lecherous man looking for the next beautiful woman he can find, that he's somewhat oblivious to her. She just keeps catching his eye as he's taking in the general impression of things. But okay, so the moment is when she says, I don't know about ghosts, but I do know that our souls can be made to go outside our bodies when we are alive. And then that's a very easy way to feel him go is to lie on the grass at night and look straight up at some big bright star And by fixing your mind upon it, you will soon find that you are hundreds and hundreds of miles away from your body, which you don't seem to want at all. So this is one of those moments I've discussed before, moments that just have so many different layers and aspects to them, all of which work in harmony. So in this one, she's looking at a bright star in the distance from her blighted star, right? Wanting to be removed from her body. Well, I mean, that has a beautiful connotation, but also kind of a dismal one, because her body has, she's been betrayed by her body and had suffered terribly because of it. So I imagine her looking up at that star and wanting to escape the reality she's in and the blighted star she's in. But also it shows that depth of soul and uniqueness that attracts his attention to her in that moment. And then there's the amazing contrast with the simplicity of the other people on the dairy farm, where the dairyman says, I've never had the least notion of that till now, or feel my soul rise so much as an inch above my shirt collar. So not everybody's capable of that sort of
having that experience.
So I just marveled over that being the moment that he is captivated by her.
Mm-hmm. I love that too.
So I am going to confess that I've kind of given up on the quotes thing, because too often my titles are just phrases taken from the quote, but I did do titles. So did you have a title for this?
I did. I actually might be cheating, but I just made it Angel Claire Rises Out of the Past.
Perfect. I had two options in my mind. One was to try to highlight the what's unique about Angel Claire and why he might be her guardian angel, that aspect, that theme of this chapter. But really, I just wanted to call it Angel Claire, so I totally sympathize with that. But if I had to choose one of those phrases, I would have chosen For the Honor and Glory of Man or Intellectual Liberty.
Those are both really good choices.
Neither seem to capture the whole chapter, but they capture something about him separating himself from society and what's special about him.
Yeah, I had the same experience this time, by the way, where I wasn't really able to choose quotes, but I did do chapter titles, with the exception of the next chapter. That's the only one I couldn't.
Okay, great. Well, I had an easy time with chapter titles for the rest of them. So, all right, let's go on to chapter 19.
All right.
Let's see. So we're watching in that chapter, we got to know Angel Claire and we saw him notice her for the first time. Now, in this section, it seems like what we're experiencing is that them coming closer into each other's orbits, but still unsure what's happening. So there's something beginning, but it hasn't really manifested yet in this chapter.
Right. Yeah.
So that's sort of how I see the overarching picture here, but it has
what
begun.
I wrote for my main takeaways, that Angel and Tess are starting to gravitate towards each other. It's just kind of like they're beginning to come closer and closer.
So any details of that process that you want to highlight?
This is not a detail of the process, but it is a question that I had about the chapter. There are, hold on, I just want to make sure that I am thinking of the right chapter. Yeah. So there's the moment where she's listening to him play music, and I guess it is kind of a facet of what we've been talking about, but she's like creeping towards him through this clump of wildlife and getting stuff all over herself. And I don't know why the description is a little gross. Like it's talking about like spittle and thistle milk and slug slime rubbing off on her naked arms, and sticky blights, snow white on the apple tree trunks made blood red stains on her skin. But it's also, I don't know, the fact that she's like going through all of that towards him, like it still has this like romantic air to me, even though it's like gross, you know what I mean? So I don't know how to make sense of that. Do you have any thoughts?
I had the same reaction. So somebody says it's the rank part of sexuality. No, but it did. There were so many sexually suggestive descriptions of nature.
Yes.
So, yeah, I guess that it just seems so, I don't know, primally physical. So I don't know what words to use exactly, but yeah, I did have that same feeling. It just seems like it goes back to the cows with their full udders. I mean, it's just every description we have on the farm is this very intense, rich, detailed, physical. Everything seems ripe is the only.
Yeah,
word
he
that
uses
kind of
the word
comes to mind.
juices a lot in this section.
Yes. So yeah, I don't know. Does anybody else have any comment that they want to make out loud?
Molly in the chat says milk,
Oh.
stickiness, snails are probably a fertility symbol. Snow, whip, blood, etc.
I mean, that
Well,
makes sense. I feel a little guilty calling it gross now, but
where is the other line? I just have to skip ahead a couple of chapters so we can make a direct connection to.
is it the
maybe
oozing
it's
fatness?
24. Oh yeah. The
The
oozing
oozing fatness
fatness
and warm ferments.
of the Var Vale at a season when the rush of juices could almost be heard below the hiss of fertilization. It was impossible that the most fanciful. Okay, yeah. So
It's sexual.
yes.
All right.
Okay. All right. Moving on.
Still answered. Thank you.
So let's see. So there's that moment when the notes of the strumming notes just lure her in. Oh, also earlier there was
I thought that was beautiful.
Tess had heard those notes in the attic above her head, dim, flattened, constrained by their confinement. They had never appealed to her as now when they wandered in the still air with a stark quality like that of nudity. So those notes are coming to her naked.
That's not in my version. Sorry.
This is the, I don't know, it's the puritanical version, I guess.
I mean, it seems like there's a lot still in here. And
Yeah.
I found remember how it took the dance, the Chaseboro dance out? It's at least in the appendix.
Oh, okay.
Like 4 different times it's in the appendix because it has like all of the different versions.
Okay.
But yeah, it's not ideal. I went to go replace it, but they didn't have it at the store. So
Okay. Caleb, did you want to comment?
oh, you're muted. Unless I'm not.
No, you're right. I was miming. So there's this part where she, they're talking about if she would like to learn, and maybe that's later on, you guys are going to get there, but she says that she wouldn't want to read history. Right. And I thought that was really interesting, like just from a place of like maybe she's feeling judgment from what she perceives as historical perfection.
If I remember correctly, what she says is that she doesn't want to learn that her woes and troubles are just the same as those of everybody throughout history, and that there's nothing distinct about hers. Maybe I felt like it was almost that she can bear it if it's distinctive, but just to learn the details of this sort of misery befalling everybody again and again and again.
Yeah, and I think it's also her saying like that, she wants to make her own choices. Like she doesn't want to know like, oh, this is the choice you make in this situation. She wants to be herself. She wants to have her own identity. And yeah, make her own life without the influence of the past. I don't know. I thought it was a very interesting reflection on her personality and actions so far.
That's an interesting idea, but I wonder, I just want to read that section really quickly to see if I can see that in it. She says, what's the use of learning that I am one of a long row only, finding out that there is set down in some old book somebody just like me, and to know that I shall only act her part, making me sad, that's all. I don't get the idea there that she would fear she'd be imitative of that person, but that she's just going through the same things that this other person suffered long ago, and there's nothing distinctive about it. She's just going through the motions of life that everybody suffers. The best is not to remember that your nature and past doings have been just like thousands and thousands, and that your coming life and doings will be like thousands and thousands. And then she says, I love this line, but it breaks my heart. I shouldn't mind learning why the sun do shine on the just and the unjust alike, but that's what books will not tell me. So all you can get from books is that misery is the inevitable, that yours is not distinct.
It's
and
just a hobble of being alive.
Yeah, yes. So what's the point? My kind of snarky comment in my head was, yeah, well, books like Hardy's aren't going to tell us why the just, I mean, it just makes us feel like this is an immutable absolute, but mhm. Okay, so can we dwell, this is the part that I confessed this was going to turn into, but can we just dwell in the moment of Tess being conscious of neither time nor space? The exaltation which she had described as being producible at will by gazing at a star came now without any determination of hers. She undulated upon the thin notes of the second-hand harp, and their harmonies passed like breezes through her, bringing tears into her eyes. I hadn't thought until now remember, she was the one who could, what was the phrase that music would do to her and nobody else?
Mm-hmm. I know what you're talking about, but I don't remember the exact words.
Do you remember the phrase? No, okay. Yeah, it was something about like breaking her heart, or she felt a connection that nobody else did.
And I like that it says that that the instrument and the skill were poor, but she still has this reaction to it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I will say I don't remember the exact phrase. I know what you're talking about, and I think it's something about pulling her heart out of her chest.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That was in the church. Okay, so what else do we need to highlight here?
I have something.
Sure.
It's about that feeling she describes, that exaltation. It immediately made me think of this poem that my teacher in high school introduced me to, and I have no idea who does this poem or who did this poem, but it's really short. If you want me to read it now, I don't know. Okay, it's on I have a picture of it on my phone, and it's just my own handwriting.
Okay.
From back then, and it's hard to read because I searched the internet and I couldn't find it. I even asked Facebook friends to see if they could help me find it. I couldn't, and they couldn't. But I found this handwritten version. Okay, so I'll read it now. It's called Flight. You know that sitting on a train, not knowing feeling as to which is moving, you or the station? You can do it with the whole earth. Okay. If you know how. Give up. Stand by night in a silent snowfall, perhaps under a street lamp. If the flakes are large and falling steadily, and the wind has gone to bed, and you look straight up, eventually, it is the flakes that are motionless. Blobs of white paint on a canvas, and you and the whole earth, which is magnetized to your feet bottoms, are floating softly, airily up. The ride only lasts for a few seconds because your senses intrude, but it's lovely while it lasts. If you can take it, come back and tell me. I've almost forgotten.
Oh, that's sweet. That sounds like Tess's ride to a bright star.
Yeah, it does.
I think Sarah found the quote
Okay.
in the chat.
Okay.
The innate love of melody, which she had inherited from her ballad singing mother, gave the simplest music a power over her, which could well nigh drag her heart out of her bosom.
Drag her heart out of her bosom. Yeah. Yes. So now there it's passing through her like breezes and bringing tears to her eyes. Okay, let's see. Anything else?
Sarah's got her hand up.
I have far too many notes. Yeah, Sarah.
I had two little things. So first was the lords and ladies that she's like pulling the petals off of. I was a little bit confused about what was happening in that scene, both like actually with the flowers. And I thought, I mean, it seems symbolic of like her own deflowering, that she's pulling these petals off. But then she says, it's a lady again. She interrupts him. I was wondering what you made of that, if anything. There's something symbolic lurking there that I have not.
I was
uncovered.
actually going to bring up the same thing because I had a similar question. I had a guess, and I actually just don't think it's right. I'll share what I thought it might be, is that it's showing like and if it is this, it's not just this. He's talking about his intellectual pursuits and how he can share those with her, but she's just focusing on the flowers. And so it's like the contrast between the history that he knows and the nature that she knows. But if that is a part of it, I don't think that's all, because I think there has to be more to it than that. But I had the same question, Sarah.
I need to find that section. Do you want to just read a couple of lines of it? Oh, here it is. Okay. She was gathering the buds called lords and ladies from the bank while he spoke. Fitfully beginning to peel a lady, meanwhile, just a sense of what might have been with me. My life looks as if it had been wasted for want of chances. When I see what you know, what you have read and seen and thought, I feel what a nothing I am. I should, bless my soul, I should be only too glad, my dear Tess, to help you do anything in the way of history or any line of reading you would like to take up. It is a lady again, interrupted she, holding out the bud she had peeled. What? I meant that there are always more ladies than lords when you come to peel them. Never mind about the lords and ladies. Yeah, I don't know the symbolism. Molly's the expert in picking up on symbols. So no, she's shaking her head here. I mean, it does feel like one of those layered moments where it is her being, I get the sense that she's feeling internally her unfitness for him. That's the strong unfitness in terms of both background, family background, and then of course the things she can't confess. So that's what I feel lurking in this scene, but I'm not quite sure. And I feel like the flowers have to be related to that, but I'm not quite sure how.
Yeah. The only other thing I can think of is the thing that it seems like she even thinks to herself later, which is that she's just, like a little child playing with flowers while he is, this very high and mighty, and his Andean intellect.
That Andean altitude of his.
Yes.
That phrase.
I had one other question. This is, I feel like I should understand this very clearly, but I just wanted to run it by you. So just before that section, when it says, thus neither having the clue to the other's secret, they were respectively puzzled at what each revealed and awaited new knowledge of each other's character and moods. We obviously know what Tess's secret is. Is Angel's secret just that he, I don't know if it's like the woman that almost entrapped him, or that he, I don't know that he's
I think
turned
the
away from his
idea-
family.
The thing that was puzzling each, I don't know why this would be called a secret exactly, but I think what was puzzling each is that what it describes is that he was at present out of his class. So why he came to the farm in the first place, because there's an obvious sense in which he does not belong there. So that's puzzling to her. And then she's puzzling because she says, this hobble of being alive is rather serious, don't you think? It is, now you put it that way. All the same, I shouldn't have expected a young girl like you to see it so just yet. How is it you do? So he's puzzled, almost puzzled by the depth of soul she possesses, and by why she would have these kind of elevated dark feelings that don't seem to fit the person that she is. So that's how I interpreted, not that there's some specific secret he's holding, but just the explanation of why he's here on the farm. I don't know, did anybody see it differently?
No, that's how I interpreted it as
Okay.
well.
Okay. Well, that could bring us to titles. Mine was respectively puzzled.
Respectively puzzled. I like that title. This was the one chapter that I didn't come up with a title.
You
for.
didn't come up with one? Yeah, because it's, they've come into each other's orbits, but they're just kind of checking each other out. Like, what? I can't quite understand you or figure you out. What is?
Yeah, I wanted to come up with my own, but I didn't want to cheat.
Okay. Yeah,
I keep having that instinct to be like, oh, well, what if it was just slightly different from the phrase in the chapter, but I feel like that's not.
I think that's fair. I think in future you should just go for it. I want to hear your formulations. Okay.
Stefan has his hand up.
Yes. We're having this sound issue again.
Oh my God.
You're just really quiet.
Is that better?
Yes.
The title is So He Can't Stomach Old Families.
Oh.
Can't stomach old families.
Well, why that one? Because I thought it was funny that was described as a caricature of his, like somebody else reported him as saying that, but it was a caricature.
Can you hear me? I'm so
Yeah.
sorry.
I think we can hear you better without, I'm gathering that when the computer's picking up the sound or whatever.
No, I think it's these headphones and my beard engulfs the.
Okay, well, I can hear you now.
So it was like a distinguishing moment when I realized that, like you said before, the separating factors between they're not going to go by tradition. They're not bound by the church. And I think it was the first moment where I realized, or that she realized, that he didn't care about her rank. He actually hated that lineage. That's all. So
no, I get that. And the interesting twist on that, though, is that she sort of has a moment of hope that that's what will make her worthy of him as the family lineage, which is ironic. Yes, right. So they both need to be utterly outside of those traditions to be able to respond to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Joseph, you want to call some more people?
Yeah, sorry, I don't know if I'm saying your name right.
Oh, that's okay. Sorry, my video it's too bright from behind, so I'll leave it off. But it's Wendy. It's just spelled strangely.
Okay.
So I had just the quote where it talks about him being surprised by her depth, where it says, not guessing the cause, there was nothing to remind him that experience is as to intensity and not as to duration. Tess's passing corporeal blight had been her mental harvest. So the idea, again, what doesn't, I guess, kill you makes you stronger, and that that part of what she'd been through had created this depth in her. And I just, that idea of that with experience, it's the intensity of it. It's not that it had to be years and years, but that that's what had made her so different, I guess.
Yeah, that's interesting, because we certainly see the way in which her experience made her grow up, in a sense, or become possess this depth. But we also saw those signs in her well before that even happened. So it doesn't seem I just hate the idea that it's this suffering that gives you depth. But yeah,
Well,
because she says, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Maybe it's this idea of this interaction. Again, there's the idea that that it reveals character, that in some ways it sort of builds it, but more that it could have
like a catalyst.
It could have destroyed her or made her so bitter
and
shut completely off from the world, but what she was able to use it, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And more than that, I love this line. Tess was trying to lead a repressed life, but she little divined the strength of her own vitality.
I love that line.
It gave her depth, dark depth, but also she has this will to live that she can't repress.
Right.
The invincible instinct towards self-delight.
Yes, exactly.
So when you guys were talking about the hating old families thing, when I read that, I was like thinking that Tess was taking that as like another thing in her past to hide, not as like a, maybe she has a chance. I was like, okay, well, she feels
right.
like
Yeah. At first, she's like, oh, maybe I
down.
should tell him this. And then she asks about it. She's like, oh, good thing I didn't.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. That was interesting.
It becomes something to hide, but initially it says, in an access of hunger for his good opinion, she bethought herself of what she had latterly endeavored to forget, so unpleasant had been its issues, the identity of her family with that of the knightly D'Urbervilles. So at first it's well, maybe this will give me distinction when other things don't. But then she gets a caricature of an answer, and then files that away as something else to be hidden.
Nope.
Yeah. Okay, should we move on to 21 or 20? We're on 20. 20, yes. So okay, yeah. Noticed her, orbiting around each other, kind of trying to figure each other out and respectively puzzled. And now, well, I'm just going to skip right to my title for this chapter, which was Balanced on the Edge of Passion.
Ooh, that's a good one.
So this is where it's starting to get intense.
I titled this one Adam and Eve.
Do you want to explain?
Well, it's because it's the chapter that has their mornings together, where it's like they're the only people on the planet.
Yeah.
And this is my favorite from this section between the three, like this one, the river and the cow. This is
now your favorite.
Oh, I'm swooning. Like it's so beautiful the way that it's described, just them being together and falling in love, and this against the backdrop of this beautiful farm. I'm so into it.
All of my notes in this section are just notes of poetic beauty describing the moments of them falling in love.
Yes, exactly. Same here.
So right from the opening, again, the earth itself seems to be creating an atmosphere for them to fall in love. The season developed and matured. Another year's installment of flowers, leaves, nightingales, thrushes, finches, and such ephemeral creatures took up their positions where only a year ago others had stood in their place. Rays from the sunrise drew forth the buds and stretched them into long stalks, lifted up sap in noiseless streams, opened petals, and sucked out scents in invisible jets and breathings. So should we just focus on our favorite moments of absolutely exquisite descriptions of these first moments of falling, that they were in that debatable land between predilection and love, but it becomes love very quickly. You want to pick favorites?
Sure. I have so many.
Mhm.
I feel like I could just pick randomly and they would all be just so beautiful. The quote that my title came from, the spectral, half-compounded, aqueous light which pervaded the open mead impressed them with a feeling of isolation as if they were Adam and Eve. Oh.
I also, well, the phrase that my title came from, balanced on the edge of passion, Tess and Claire unconsciously studied each other, ever balanced on the edge of a passion, yet apparently keeping out of it. All the while, they were converging under an irresistible law as surely as two streams in one veil. So maybe even better than balanced on the edge of a passion is converging under an irresistible law, because that's more an accurate description of what's happening between them.
And it just like, it made me feel like warm inside to hear that sentence. I love this. Minute diamonds of moisture from the mist hung too upon Tess's eyelashes and drops upon her hair like seed pearls. Just like every aspect of this scene is beautiful.
And I have that line, of course, underlined too. And then so that was in the early morning hours when it's still a little, a little dark and the early light is reflecting off of her. But when the day grew quite strong and commonplace, these dried off her. And then what happens? Moreover, Tess then lost her strange and ethereal beauty. Her teeth, lips, and eyes scintillated in the sunbeams, and she was again the dazzlingly fair dairy maid only.
Only.
It's not like it was a magic that created a beauty that wasn't there. She's just transformed into a different form of beauty when the sun comes out.
Right. Yeah. It's like this divine beauty when the sun is rising. And then once the sun is all the way up, it's like, oh, now you're just like super, super, super beautiful.
Yeah. In that light, there was the phosphorescent. So you said divine, and it says, there was also the description of the phosphorescence on her face, where she looks ghostly as if she were merely a soul at large. And then later it uses the phrase, the visionary essence of woman. So she goes from, but in that light, being the visionary essence of woman to being a flesh and blood.
Yes. Yeah. And it says earlier in the chapter, then it would grow lighter and her features would become simply feminine. They had changed from those of a divinity who could confer bliss to those of a being who craved it.
Oh, so good. Okay, from a divinity to a being, both beautiful.
Both beautiful.
In regard to your looking out your window and seeing the purple, I just have to highlight this line that I loved so much. In the twilight of the morning, light seems active, darkness passive. In the twilight of evening, it is the darkness which is active and crescent, and the light which is in the drowsy reverse.
That was the exact line I was thinking of when I saw the purple out my window yesterday.
Yeah, there is everybody experiences there being something magical about evening and that transition of lights, but having somebody who can put it into words that are poetic and
true.
And true. Yeah, that's exactly right. Poetic and true.
I just love the idea of them being like, feeling like they're the only ones on the planet and just soaking the joys of each other up in those really exciting early moments of falling in love.
Okay, so this is risen above the other two, which are still to come.
Yes, it is. Okay. It's my favorite. I think Sarah, it's one of the most romantic scenes I've ever read.
Sarah, you have a comment on 20?
Oh, I have so many comments, but just the one other the one other section I loved was he called her Artemis, Demeter, and other fanciful names half teasingly, which she did not like because she did not understand them. Call me Tess, she would say askance, and he did. And I just loved that.
I love that too.
Yeah, it's hard to put into words what it is about it, but it's something like emphasizing her innocence. He means something so glorifying of her, but she can't comprehend that in her like earnest, sweet simplicity. So she just wants to be Tess. And I
Yeah.
guess the name Tess belongs up there with Artemis and Demeter.
There's so many comparisons between her and, you know, divinity or royalty. There's also the other one that earlier, fair women are usually asleep at midsummer dawns. She was close at hand and the rest were nowhere. Like, I love how it's sort of, it's that progression of like, it starts by noticing and then by proximity and then grows slowly over these chapters into like a depth of feeling that we see at the end of the section.
Yes.
I really appreciate you highlighting that. That just made me experience the whole chapter even more emotionally, because it's seeing the divinity in the dairymaid. That's what is so powerful about this, is that she is a goddess, but she's a simple dairymaid. So drawing that out of her and his ability to see it in her and being able to experience that soul of her. Yeah, that's the divinity and the dairymaid. That's my new title.
Right, that's a good one. I love that.
Yeah, so that in chapter 19, there's this moment where he says she walked in the garden to continue her regrets, and that really struck me. And it's interesting now, like the garden has become this wonderful space where, you know, they're connecting and this is growing from that. But yeah, I don't know, it's kind of started with her segmenting herself off and just dwelling in her regrets, and yeah, interesting.
And those still come back in these next chapters, and she tries to withdraw again, but it's that inevitable convergence that she can't stop. Okay, chapter 21. Molly did the Churn Story, rivaled the Kneeling Bowl.
I love that story.
I just loved the line. I mean, there's a lot in the Churn Story, so we have to talk about all the elements of the Churn Story, but I just love the line when she says, "I've heard tell in my younger days that somebody being in the house being in love will cause the churn to break." And then the dairyman says, "Ah, yes, but it had nothing to do with the lovemaking. It was the damage to the churn." It's plain, straightforward, simple.
Right. Well, and also it starts working right when Tess leaves the house.
Okay, so the Churn Story. I mean, it's funny and quaint and, you know, from the dairyman's perspective, but it's the story of a mother going after a man who took advantage of her daughter. And Tess is just watching this from the outside, and you can't help but feel angry and indignant that no such justice was sought for Tess. And meanwhile, everybody like me in this moment was enjoying it as a humorous story. And for her, it's as only she sees the sorrow of it and makes her turn pale.
It's a bitter pill she has to swallow.
Yeah. So it's a reminder of the thing that she's been, you know, forgetting as she falls in love, but it's just, yeah, it's a brutal scene to watch.
Yeah, because it's not only a reminder of the pain, but a reminder of why she can't have this man that she's falling in love with.
Right.
Stefan.
Check. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This was the first time in this whole section of like all the chapters we read where I thought, you know, here comes the malevolency again, because I thought like the superstition of the Mrs. Crick was gonna, you know, like, oh, you know, someone's in love and it's a hex on the process, but it's almost like Hardy was saying through Mr. Crick, don't worry, I'm not gonna, you know, make that happen just yet. Like you say, you just kind of shut it down real quick. But it's still like, you know, her love. I mean, I haven't read this, but I just know it's going to become a problem. So, and this was the first indication of that. So that's all.
That's a funny way to, it's funny to think of it that way, that it's like, oh, it's a bad omen. If people are in love, it's going to wreak havoc. No, actually, it's just the mechanics of the churn being broken. But how were they broken? Because a mother was pursuing justice for her daughter taken advantage of, which is the problem in the first place. So when you put it that way, it feels like he's toying with us a little bit. Okay, so someone mentioned the 3 dairy maids, and I said we're going to see more of them. Now we have. I just love them so much.
I
don't
them
know.
as well.
Okay, they're. I actually just wrote in the margin of my book, how cute are they? There's something so. I just love how uninhibited they are about their love, and how earnest they are, and how there's no kind of anger or jealousy between them about it. They just sort of.
There was no jealousy because there was no hope.
There's no hope. Yeah. But even so, it's just like that first image of them standing in their nightgowns at the window, mooning over Angel. I was
It's
like,
so
the 3
sweet.
graces. I know, it's so sweet. Let's see. Oh, and just the descriptions of the kind of uninhibited earnestness of kissing his shadow.
I loved that. Oh my gosh. I thought that was so sweet.
And they're teasing each other a little bit, but just such benevolent teasing, because it's almost like, you love him just as much as I do. that kind of teasing, not trying to make her feel bad for it, just make her confess.
Right. You can talk about it. It's cool. We're all right there.
And then I love this line, one side and another side, and Marion's plump figure side biggest of all. And then Tess is described as the deeper passioned Tess. So she's still, in a sense, she's in the group. They're a group of 4, but really, well, it's the 3 Leahs and 1 Rachel, right?
Right. Yes.
Okay. So, and anything, we can talk about chapter title or theme of this chapter.
Sure. Yeah. For this one, I saw the essential as being the pardon me, I'm just looking for a particular passage. The part where at the end she's reflecting on what has kind of been a really bad day for her with the story, and also knowing about the feelings of the other dairy maids. So I called it 2 bitter pills.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, because we've got the Churn story, which brings to the surface her reflections on what happened with Alec. And then we have the 3 dairy maids also in love with him. Wait, sorry, what was the second bitter pill?
This conversation was another of the bitter pills she had been obliged to swallow that day. So it was her talking to the girls about their love for Angel.
Okay. What I can't recall what was okay, but so the Churn story and then the 3 graces, and together, that's what their nickname in my mind, and then together those give her the thought that she knows she can hold her own in Angel Claire's heart against these her candid friends, but should she?
Right.
So
exactly. Realizing it says that, was it in this chapter? She says that, sorry, one second.
That's okay. No, I think it's not till the end of this chapter that she asks herself whether she should do this.
Yes, but the grave question was, ought she to do this?
Ought she to do this? Which was my title. Ought she to do this?
Oh, okay.
Because that's the dilemma that it's put. So you put it in terms of the bitter pills that she faces, and then I put it in terms of the question that it gives rise to. Yeah.
Right. Yes.
Steph.
I just want to mention about the 3 dairy maids. So I really love in stories where there's really no conflict between characters who are in love. I just watched Casablanca for the first time the other night, And the ending where, Rick pretty much arranges for his, lover to go away with that. I forget the guy's name, but it's always nice because this is another part where I thought where there was going to be conflict and these three girls are going to be the reason things were going to go bad. But it was nice and refreshing that they weren't vindictive. And they, and until I read Rand and heard her view of like rational people and recognizing that, kind of your place in things, like in Atlas Shrugged and stuff like that, where there's really no conflict between good people in relationships, and you might want the same thing, but you kind of recognize that you might not be the best for it, and you rationally think about that. And it's just refreshing to see that in this story. I just started noticing that, so that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, Grace pointed out that it says they had no conflict because they had no hope. But there's kind of an just honest resignation to the fact that he's not in love with them. And I love the element, I think this is probably part of what you're responding to, that it doesn't change their feelings about him. There's no bitterness or spite, that no sour grapes. It's just, we just love so much.
Well, because when you have no hope, you can become vindictive,
right.
You have no hope. So
right. No, that's part of their sweetness, I think, is that they just keep loving him completely, even though he loves Tess and they have no chance with him.
Molly says, the Hardy version of no conflict between rational beings. They're all hopeless pawns of fate.
There's no conflict among hopeless men.
You're all blighted anyways.
Oh my gosh. That is definitely true, but it's also a lot sweeter than that, because they are hopeless, but I love their passion. They're just overwhelming passion for him. It's like look at this exchange. We can't all marry him, said Is. We shan't, either of us, which is worse still, said the eldest. There he is again. I really want to see this. Well done. There he is again. They all three blew him a silent kiss. Why? Asked Reddy quickly. She seems to be the one having the hardest time with this. She cried herself to sleep. Because he likes Tess Derbyfield best, said Marion, lowering her voice. I've watched him every day and have found it out. So just the sighs and the swooning and the blowing him kisses, even though, because they study him constantly, they know his heart belongs to someone else.
Yes. Yeah, Reddy is the one who has the hardest time. She's the youngest, right? This is like her first love.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, chapter 22.
What did you call it?
I called it Marry One of Them.
I called it The Weed.
Oh, because they're seeking out the garlic weeds, right?
And she's also trying to weed out her feelings for him.
Very good. Yeah, I like it. Trying very unsuccessfully, but trying.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So this brief chapter is all about her having resolved that he'd be better off marrying one of the other dairy maids, and trying to facilitate that, while the romantic tension in this chapter is amazing. They crept and crept, the hem of her petticoat just touching his gaiter and his elbow sometimes brushing hers. So that's what's happening while she's trying to persuade him that he ought to pay attention to the other girls. Doesn't work very well.
To obscure her own wretched charms.
Yes.
So sad.
Yes. Okay, I do have a question about this chapter, and then we can move on to the river.
I wonder if it's the same question that I have.
Oh, we'll see. Okay, so the question was, it's a long sentence, so I guess I have to read the long sentence to get to the question. Tess was woman enough to realize from their avowals to herself that Angel Clare had the honor of all the dairy maids in his keeping, and her perception of his care to avoid compromising the happiness of either in the least degree bred a tender respect in Tess for what she deemed, rightly or wrongly, the self-controlling sense of duty shown by him, a quality which she had never expected to find in one of the opposite sex. Okay, so he's never taken advantage of one of the dairy maids. That surprises her because she knows men to be like Alec. So it's a little bit, that's her image of men. But then what does this phrase mean for what she deemed rightly or wrongly the self-controlling sense of duty shown by him? I gathered that it means that's wrong, that it's not a self-controlling sense of duty because he's not in fact drawn to these women at all. So it's not that he has to impose self-control and duty upon himself to keep his hands off of them.
Right.
But I don't know, does anybody have any thoughts about that?
Well, in my version, it says, bred
Oh, no.
tender respect in Tess for what she deemed the self-controlling sense of duty shown by him.
Say that again.
Mine doesn't say rightly or wrongly. It just says in her perception of his care to avoid tender respect in Tess for what she deemed the self-controlling sense of duty shown by him.
Interesting. So in that case, it was right. The assumption is
Well, it
that
says she deemed, so she
deemed
thought,
she deemed rightly or wrongly. Okay.
which I
Well,
guess means the same thing,
more
rightly or wrongly. That's how she understood it.
Yeah, I suppose. Makes it much more clear that it might be wrong if you throw that phrase in.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, if there's no thoughts about that, I'll just go with my own interpretation of it. All right. Chapter. Wait.
Can I ask my quick question about this chapter?
Yes. Oh yeah. I forgot.
So, and maybe I just read it wrong, in which case, never mind about my question.
Or maybe my version will say something entirely different.
Maybe.
We'll see.
So it's when she says, don't they look pretty? Who, Izzy, Hewitt, and Reddy? Tess had moodily decided, blah, blah, blah. And he says, pretty? Well, yes, they are pretty girls, fresh looking. I have often thought so. And then she says, though poor dears, prettiness won't last long. And then I wrote in the margin, neither did your desire to recommend them.
Interesting.
So I am just one, like, clearly she loves him. And so recommending them to him is not sincere. So maybe that's why she says that, but it just seems like such a quick.
I think I did interpret that differently. So
okay,
let me just try this out, but I'm not sure. Because she too is pretty and she's saying of her own prettiness that it won't last. I don't think it's specific to them.
Oh, that makes
prettiness
sense.
Per se won't last long. And I think what she's emphasizing is they're really good dairy women and they'd make
that's
a
what
good
she
wife.
says next. That was one of the possibilities that I had in mind as well. I was like, is she trying to be a little crappy right now? Or that doesn't seem like it lines up with my impression of her character. No, so I thought maybe it would be that she was just talking about like, oh, but they'll be excellent dairy women and way better than me. Than I. They skim better than I.
She might even be trying to like shift the standard. You know, if it's on a prettiness scale, you might be ranking me highest. But really, in the long run, what you ought to be doing is ranking wives, and they're better dairy maids. So
and prettiness won't last long. So don't think about that. Think about how they're better dairy women. Yeah. They'll be practically better for you.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's it. All right, the river. Oh, gosh,
I love it.
It's just such a powerful, memorable, visceral moment. I mean, you just experience every bit of that scene. So that again, I described this at the very beginning, but maybe some of you will start to feel what I mean. This is the sort of scene that when I'm coming back into it, it's like something I lived. It's like I'm reading a description of something I personally went through before. That's what it feels like. So it's just the vividness and power of that scene, but also the romantic tension of it is almost unbearable.
It's so thick is the word I want to use to describe it. You have
to wait through 3 women that he carries across the river for him to finally knowing he's going to take Tess in his arms.
Saving her for last.
And oh, that moment where it says, he went, poor little Reddy, when he was heard returning for the third time, Reddy's throbbing heart could be almost seen to shake her. He went up to the red-haired girl, and while he was seizing her, he glanced at Tess. His lips could not have pronounced more plainly, "It will soon be you and I." Her comprehension appeared in her face. She could not help it. There was an understanding between them. Ah, so amazing. Okay. And then, so once there's there was an understanding between them. So I guess that is the moment that it becomes, if they were balanced on the edge of passion before, this is where it's tipped. So in the last chapter, she tried to repress it, and it had been forming inside of her, but she really tried to repress it so she could push him off on one of the other dairymaids. But it seems like it's in that moment when he looks at her and says, with his face, "It will soon be you and I," that's when there's a total understanding between them. I loved this just a little bit further on when it says, I did not expect such an event today, nor I ... The water came up so sudden," pretending that that's what they're talking, that the rise in the water was what she understood him to refer to. The state of her breathing belied. She knows what he's referring to, and it's not the river.
And he knows that she knows.
And he knows that she knows. But, and then there again with the other dairymaids, how there's the lines about their hearts throbbing simultaneously, and each one of them knowing he's not in love with them, still revels in this moment of being able to be loved. Yeah. And the air of the sleeping chamber seemed to palpitate with the hopeless passion of the girls. They writhed feverishly under the oppressiveness of an emotion thrust on them by cruel nature's law, an emotion which they had neither expected nor desired. And then there's more just about this is where there was so much frankness and so little jealousy because there was no hope.
Yep,
There was not deluding themselves. So
and it's also
one of my favorite lines.
Yeah.
Oh, one of my favorite lines was when one of them was describing how still she was, hoping that he would kiss her.
Yeah.
She tried everything to be as still as possible,
so that he would kiss her.
My goodness. Okay.
And I'm just so sad just talking about Reddy again, the one who's taking it the hardest, the poor child torn by a feeling which she hardly understood.
Yeah. Yes.
Sad.
Well, here I feel like Hardy is making explicit what's so lovable about them. I think I need to, the full recognition of the futility of their infatuation from a social point of view, its purposeless beginning, its self-bounded outlook, its lack of everything to justify existence in the eye of civilization, while lacking nothing in the eye of nature. The one fact that it did exist, ecstasizing them to a killing joy. They're just loving being in love. They don't need,
they just love how it
they're
feels.
not dependent on the return of his love. All this imparted to them a resignation, a dignity, which a practical and sordid expectation of winning him as a husband would have destroyed. So that's how those two things are integrated. I think the hopelessness and the dignity and beauty in them is that it's hopeless, but the hopelessness just removes anything that would turn into a conflict and just lets them revel in the experience of being in love, even though they cry themselves to sleep. They like that part too, probably.
Yeah, I've had the same thought. I mean, I think it was really interesting how clear they were about the influence of sexual nature, just like being a thing that you have to deal with, as opposed to getting it tied up in like an absolute possibility of a future. They're just saying like, oh, this is how life is. This is nature. You know, we feel these flirty feelings, and I thought that was really interesting and unique that it would be explored in that way. I don't know
Yeah.
if that's true in other literature. Like, it just seems like an idea that, like, very clearly separating this okay, natural feeling with these people. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to think now if I can think of anything else in literature that connects with this, but just highlighting that so there's the unrequited love, right? The kind of cliche of unrequited love, and that is usually depicted as something torturous and miserable. And here it's unrequited love that's dignified and beautiful and enjoyable in its own sake, on its
Yes,
own
that's
terms.
exactly it. That's exactly it. Very
Yeah,
interesting.
that is unique and also makes a lot of sense to me. One
Yeah.
could enjoy being in love when it can't be returned, but just the fact of having that feeling is enough.
It's one of those other things about Thomas Hardy that is so unique and poetic and true. Like,
Yeah.
it captures that excitement of being in love without the hopelessness of unrequited love that you normally see.
Yeah. It does call to mind White Nights, and if anyone has done that and read with me, there's a little bit of that in its theme.
Yes, I hadn't thought of that.
Okay. Did you have a title for this section? Now, so there's a strange thing with this chapter, that the whole thing is that the dairy maid's experience of their love for Angel, the understanding that's formed between Angel and Tess, and it's all just intensity of romantic connection. That's what but then the last sentence of the chapter is, and the thorny crown of this sad conception was that she whom he really did prefer in a cursory way to the rest, she who knew herself to be more impassioned in nature, cleverer, more beautiful than they, was in the eyes of propriety far less worthy of him than the homelier ones whom he ignored. So it's a strange chapter to summarize, because the emotional emphasis of it and the attention is given to the understanding, but then it ends with that ominous line.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't know what to call it, but did you have a chapter?
I did. So because I see what you see when taking a bird's eye view of this chapter, but if I were to like describe it to someone else and only be able to describe one instance of it, it would be the thing at the river. So I decided to call it 3 Leahs for 1 Rachel.
Oh yes, that is the title.
That is the title.
That is.
It is now.
It has to be. It's
It
not
is
what it's not what I'm not even going to say what I wrote, because that is the title. Okay, chapter 24.
The oozing fatness and warm ferments. That's the first line.
This, yes. The with the juices of fertilization. I just was absolutely dazzled by this the first time I read it. Just thought this was the most moving scene of somebody kind of succumbing to their love that I could recall in literature. So I don't know if other people experienced it in the same way, but it really got me.
It felt like an overwhelming outpour of something from my heart as I was reading it. Like when he goes to
Like
embrace her, I was just like, like that sound
like
came out of my mouth.
torn out of your bosom, something like that. Yeah. So just again, somebody described him as painterly. So to have the painterly aspect be, it's like a painting that Luke Travers has taught you to appreciate, because it's that painterly vision, but it's so full of emotional significance as you're looking at it. So the image of Tess with her face pressed to the side of the cow and him examining it in silhouette and observing everything he loves about it. What we're looking at is a woman with her face pressed to the side of a cow. I mean, it's very vividly rendered, but that's what it is. And that scene is so emotionally powerful, watching her face through his eyes. So I just have to read that section because it's one of my favorites of all. How very lovable her face was to him. Yet there was nothing ethereal about it. All was real vitality, real warmth, real incarnation. And it was in her mouth that this culminated. Eyes almost as deep and speaking he had seen before, and cheeks perhaps as fair, brows as arched, a chin and throat almost as shapely. Her mouth he had seen nothing to equal on the face of the earth. To a young man with the least fire in him, that little upward lift in the middle of her red top lip was distracting, infatuating, maddening. And then I loved the thing at the end. It was the touch of the imperfect on the would-be perfect that gave the sweetness, because it was that which gave the humanity. The guy in the birthmark needed to hear that.
Yes.
So yeah. Anything else you want to?
I just love the introduction to this chapter so much. Talking about how the setting made it impossible that their love should not grow passionate. It was impossible that the most fanciful love should not grow passionate. The ready bosoms existing there were impregnated by their surroundings. Just like, this is the time, this is the place for love.
Yes.
It's like, what could be more natural?
It was an effort on the part of nature to match the state of hearts at Talbotha's Dairy. And then just little phrases like the waxing fervor of passion for the soft and silent Tess. There is no question that he is a poet.
He is, like, just these little phrases here, like not here and there, everywhere. Like everywhere. You can take almost any sentence and there's some combination of words there that makes me go, oh.
Yes. Like,
so beautiful.
She yielded to his embrace with unreflecting inevitableness.
Unreflecting inevitableness. Oh my gosh.
And then we have the wonderful contrast with Alec again, where he embraces her so sweetly. And as we know, the understanding has already been formed between them. And yet he says, "Forgive me, Tess, dear. I ought to have asked. I did not know what I was doing. I do not mean it as a liberty. I am devoted to you, Tessie, dearest, in all sincerity." So her guardian angel.
Yeah.
Caleb.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment, like, when you're talking about the head on the cow, the way that you get led up to visualizing that moment was really brilliant. Like, most people stand down and look into the bucket. So you have like all this perspective that it's just, he builds, and this is not the first time. Like, there's several times when he describes like body positioning that you feel like you can visualize it so well. And there's one thing that's like about the seasons and things like that, but just being able to read this and then just get everything like so hugely, it's beautiful. Yeah. And definitely he's a poet. So many times, just like tickling words, just incredible. Okay, that's it.
Just filled with thrills reading this chapter.
Yeah, if it's a failing in an author to present abstractions instead of conveying those abstractions through concretes, Hardy is an absolute master at conveying the feelings that he's trying to get across through very visual, very, I'm going to make up a word, experienceable, as if you are living it.
That's the right word. That's the right word.
Yep, that's the word.
Sometimes you have to make one up. So yes, I called this, I couldn't decide. Well, I called it a change to the pivot of the universe.
Ooh, good. I chose
line.
a similarly themed, the gravitation of the two into one.
Yes.
Just that
Yeah.
moment where it's just like, like
Okay.
he
it's
has to
done.
be near her. Oh my God, he has to hold her.
Yep. Yes, because now a veil had been whisked aside. The tract of each one's outlook was to have a new horizon. Oh, it could have been a new horizon too.
It could have,
That would-
yeah.
that would- Thenceforward for a short time or for a long.
Or for a long
Chad finished the book and said, "Which is it?" I mean,
time.
finish the chapter. Okay. Any final thoughts anybody wants to share before we close this session?
I just want to echo thanks again. Thank you so much for introducing us to this book.
You're very welcome. Thanks for sharing it with us. I think I can speak for both of us when I say it's just pleasure to talk about it.
It really is. When Lisa and I were standing in the office together talking about Thomas Hardy, because I was reading another book by him, and she came up with the idea of meeting weekly to discuss the book. And I thought she just meant like she and I with coffee and donuts, like talking about the book. I was like, that sounds great. Awesome. And then all of a sudden there was all these like Zoom links coming to me. I was like, oh, you mean like with other people? I'm like, great. That's even better. I was perfectly happy to just sit in a coffee shop and talk about this. I was filled with glee at the idea. But this has been like more joy than I could have imagined.
Thanks for agreeing to it. I think she was clear on it before the Zoom leaks came, but we're allowed a little creative license.
No, in the same conversation, I was like, "Oh, you mean like with people?" And you said, "Yeah." And I said,
Yes,
"Oh,
I
cool."
do. Even better. Okay, so I think the next assignment should be 25 to 30. That's what I'm going to assign.
Okay.
So 25 to 30, we'll post it in the Facebook group and we will meet again next Sunday.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Such a pleasure.
Thank you.